Hey, today I'm talking about Dune. Spoilers, I loved it. Go watch it, it's great. I'm also going to talk about two other movies that were actually inspired by Dune. And the names of those two other movies are Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and Fantastic Planet. What's up is Dune. Oh my god. I had such high hopes for this movie, and it's been sitting with me just so much. Like, I can't stop thinking about it. For background, I haven't read the book, but I have seen the David Lynch film about 2 years ago, and I've seen the sci-fi miniseries twice, back around when it came out. So I was very familiar with like the base story, and I remembered most of the bigger beats, but kind of forgot more of like the details and stuff. But man, there is so much I love about this movie. Like, obviously I love the base story. The base story is incredible. It's such an interesting, unique story. It's so cool. And then, like, more specifically about this movie, I love the look of this movie. Like, all the ships were just like grand and epic. I love the Firefly ships. Those are so neat and creative. Or like the still suits, like they looked like they would work how they're supposed to work. And then, like, I think all the actors did a fantastic job. I love Timothée Chalamet. He did great. I was a little hesitant about Jason Momoa, but I really loved him in this. And Rebecca Ferguson just knocked it out of the park. Oscar Isaac, oh my god. The murder-suicide scene was amazing. In contention with my favorite scene in the movie. He doesn't do a ton in that scene, but like what he does is he delivers. Oh, it's so good. My other favorite scene is the box scene. And apparently that's like a scene that really won over a lot of people for like Timothée Chalamet. Like, he nailed that scene. He is my Paul. Even Zendaya, she's barely in this movie, spoilers. Like, every time she pops up, she is so memorable. And kind of going off of that, I loved all of like the way they did the dream sequence like stuff, or like the visions. It really nailed that aesthetic of like, it feels like a vision. And also crazy love how they did the voice. It's so, I don't know, it works, it gets me. It just works on like a fundamental level. It's great. And I know some book readers are kind of more, they got their nitpicks, and I can understand their nitpicks. I feel like a decent number of them are going to be addressed in part 2. There's a lot of like stuff with the traitor that kind of got glossed over, and I understand why it got cut, and I think it will be a much bigger deal in the sequel. I don't know. And I also strongly disagree with like the criticisms about Jessica, who I love Jessica, she was great, that she was too emotional. Again, I haven't read the book, but I don't think she was overly emotional or anything. She seemed like a normal amount of emotional. I tried to pay closer attention to that in the second watch through, and it's like she got emotional like when the town was being attacked and she was just alone with Paul. Like, that makes sense to be emotional when you're alone with your son. And then she was also emotional like when they were flying through the storm, you know, just like falling like a rock. You're in a tornado. Of course you're gonna be emotional. You're moments away from death. I don't know. She's good. I like her. I like her a lot. It works. Everything about this movie works. I debated a bit for where I was gonna put this movie, because I was just like, I mean, I liked it a lot, but did I connect to it as much as I connected to some of those other movies in my top 5? And the answer is yes. Everything about this movie just lingered in my head so much that the next day I rewatched it on HBO Max, and that was great. And then I was very tempted to watch it again the next day and the next day. I'm gonna watch it at least 2 or 3 more times before it leaves HBO Max. I also plan on going to the theater again, specifically an IMAX theater, because I think that's just gonna be amazing. Like, I gotta see them sandworms on the biggest screen possible, because you can't not. Oh, it's great. So yeah, love this movie. If you somehow haven't seen it yet, see it. It's great. You're in for a wonderful time. Yes. Next up is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. This is a 1984 Japanese movie. It is a Studio Ghibli movie before they were officially Studio Ghibli, so it's kind of their first one, but it's also not. But it definitely has like a lot of the hallmarks of a Studio Ghibli movie. The basic premise is it is about this woman who lives in this village that's kind of sealed off from the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is kind of going through the nuclear apocalypse, the long-term effects of the nuclear apocalypse. So like there's so many mutated bugs and just all this gross stuff everywhere, but they're kind of like a little Garden of Eden type of thing, sort of. I can definitely feel how it's influenced by Dune. Like the big creepy bug things are very sandwormy, and really a lot of like the design and aesthetic of the movie feels very Dune-esque. As far as like my enjoyment of this movie itself, I liked it a lot. I loved how strong the main character is. She is such a badass, and like I love just like her whole mentality about stuff, because she's a very loving person and just like very anti-violence, very like we can talk out our issues, like we shouldn't fight, but then she does have a moment where she breaks, and then she later has a moment where she breaks about breaking, and it's really good. It's a really pretty movie. It's a really well-told movie. I mean, definitely if you're a fan of the other Studio Ghibli movies, this is worth a watch. But I think it's a good story that's worth watching just in general. It's definitely more of an adult story. Kind of compare it to Princess Mononoke. That's a very adult one. So yeah, I didn't end up putting it in the really liked category, and I think I just didn't really super connect to it. I did like it a ton though. It's definitely solid, and it's definitely worth a watch. And lastly is Fantastic Planet. This is a 1973 French animated movie, and it is something else. God. I would kind of describe the premise as it's like Planet of the Apes meets Watership Down with like a little bit of Logan's Run in there too. And it's like Watership Down both in kind of animation-ish style, but then also with just like its grand themes and grand adventure type of thing. This is such a fascinating movie. It's so short, but it feels long. I won't actually say the exact premise because part of this movie is just figuring out what the hell is going on. I don't want to rob you of that experience because it's a difficult movie to get through. I'm very much so not a fan of the animation style. It's kind of cheap. Like the individual frames, there's a ton of detail and a ton of talent that went into it, but there's not a lot of like in-between animation styles, so like it's very type of thing, and that is not my favorite type of animation. It takes a while to get used to, and this movie is very unapologetically weird. Like if you think of 70s trippy shit, you're thinking of this movie. Ugh. And like the first 15 minutes I kept just being like, what the hell am I watching? What is going on right now? But then it does come together and it tells a very, very interesting story, and I can again see Dune's influences on it. This is definitely a movie that I'm glad I watched. It was something I'm glad I've experienced, but I don't think I'm ever going to watch this movie again because it's just so strange and so out there. I would recommend it if you think that's what you're in the mood for, is just like crazy trippy animation, a weird story, which is like lots of out there ideas, but they're ideas that make you think about just kind of the human experience in general and like what even is life. Like that kind of stuff. It's definitely like a movie to watch while high, but you don't need to be high in order to appreciate what it's doing. So yeah, it was weird as shit. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Dune. Like I said, there was a lot of debate about where I put this movie, and I was like, it's living rent-free in my brain. I have to put this at number one. But it's number one on the brand new movies list, and that is out of a total of 59 brand new movies this year. And then jumping over to the old movies that I watched this year, we got Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, sitting at number 69 in the Quite Like section. And then bringing up the rear is Fantastic Planet, sitting at number 112 in the Quite Like section, and that is at a total of 238 old movies so far this year, and that brings the grand total out of all the movies I've seen so far this year up to 297.